in women's health, aka pelvic floor. I'm a wife, mom of 3, foodie, lover of all things movement and nature, and I'm super passionate about educating, empowering, and supporting other women like you to find and maintain balance throughout all aspects of their lives, without pain, pressure, or peeing their pants. And this is the Balanced Momtality Podcast, where we will talk about all things pelvic floor, your core, and optimizing your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum recovery, providing you with the knowledge and tools so that you can feel like the strong, playful, and happy mom that you and your family deserve. Now let's get you out of those pads and back to loving movement. Fill up your water, pop in those AirPods, roll out your mat, and let's connect. Before we start today's episode, just a quick disclaimer that anything mentioned in this podcast is not meant to treat or diagnose any medical conditions. If you have any questions or concerns about your healthcare needs, please seek the care of your medical provider. This is also a safe space where we will be talking about very sensitive but important topics, such as issues with peeing and pooping, relationships, and even sex. So if you have littles around, probably a good idea to pop those AirPods in. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All right, my friend. Well, it is Friday. We are a little behind on our podcast this week, but that's because my household got taken down by the stomach flu. It's been a long one, friends, and we are slowly climbing out of our hole and coming back to life. It is the first day I'm back seeing patients, the first day I've eaten a full meal. So bear with me as this podcast is coming out a little later than planned. Usually I like to put this second episode out on Thursday, but we are here. We are showing up, consistent, not perfect, right? So I hope you're having a much better week than me. Otherwise, I'm hoping this weekend I will get to tap into some much needed rest and relaxation and get the energy back in my body to jump back into the gym this week. Because this last week did not go as planned, needless to say. And it's so funny because Monday I felt so strong. I was coming out of my ovulation, which is usually when I have more pelvic vein heaviness, and I can't really do super heavy hip thrusts because the bar is really loaded. And so when I pull that heavy bar over my pelvis, if I've got a lot of vein pressure, I can tell, and it just does not feel good. So this week I was like, you know what, that heaviness is gone. Let's see if I can hit over 300 pounds. It's been a year since I got my iliac stent placed in my vein last December. And I wanted to see if I could get back up over 300 pounds. And I was so stoked, you guys. I hit 320 and I did 6 reps, which means I can do more. So it is a good time to just reflect on all the good things that has happened, because it can feel like there's so much in your face pushing you back, but you are still moving forward. And Tuesday, I felt like I was a freaking superhero. I was a rock star. I was so strong. I felt amazing. I felt so confident about the week. And then the stomach bug hit and my body was like, oh no, my friend, you are going to chill and be a bum on the couch the rest of the week. And that is fine. I did some breath work and some mobility when I wasn't throwing up and I felt up to it. But there was a whole day where I just didn't leave the couch because that was also what my body needed. And that is okay. But with that being said, I thought it was time to jump back into this conversation that I've had multiple times on the podcast, but I haven't quite made it this obvious. So I wanted to just set aside an episode just for this, because I've had quite a few patients recently having a really hard time breaking apart this myth that crunches and V-sits and leg lifts and all of these core workouts, right? Like they are core exercises, are going to be what makes our core strong. And that's just not the case. And in many ways, those exercises can actually be doing a lot more harm than good. So if you're lying on your back, doing crunches, doing leg lifts, hoping it'll flatten your tummy and stop the leaking, but it's not working, That's because, my love, crunches are not the answer. Crunches and sit-ups do not equal functional core strength. They do not equal a strong core. Crunches and sit-ups, when using the abdominal muscles majority of the time, are only going to target the abs that you see, that rectus six-pack muscle group, and your hip flexors. So that iliopsoas that helps you lift your hip is also helping you do that crunch and sit up. So you might be making your hip flexors stronger. You also might be making your hip flexors tighter and causing some dysfunction and pain by doing crunches. And crunches and sit-ups can also be causing a lot of pressure down on the pelvic floor and then put you at risk for more leaking, more prolapse, and more pelvic floor dysfunction. And this isn't even just my patients, although this is something I want you to really start assessing your movements with the body boundaries that I've talked about many times before, because if you really understand those body boundaries or the limits that your core has, then you can then differentiate within your body what is a good core exercise for you and what's not. And then think about the big take home that every exercise is a core workout. And that's because you are engaging your core. You're bracing that core system with every effort move you do, even overhead shoulder press, bicep curl, calf raises, squats, lunges, whatever it is. You do want to think about engaging that brace and making sure that your core can stabilize and hold you throughout all of those movements. So we first need to think about, are we even engaging our brace with exercise? Because even with those sit-ups and crunches that are supposed to be for your core, you might not even be using your core. Isn't that weird, right? Like, wait, I'm doing sit-ups. Aren't I using my core? Maybe not. Do you even know what your core is? Because it is not those six-pack ab muscles. Your core is actually this deep canister grouping of muscles. So in the abdominal wall, there is an abdomen layer that is part of your core, and we do have multiple layers of your core. So yes, the rectus is a part of the external layer of your core, but when we're talking about a strong core, we're talking about that deep core system, because you could have a ripped six-pack muscle and still have a weak core. That deep core needs to be able to stabilize your spine and your pelvis, support your internal organs and your alignment, and manage pressure effectively through all the movements that you're doing. So even thinking about having strength, it's like, well, is that even really the goal? Yes, we want to have strength, but if that's all you have, you can still have a dysfunctional core. You can have a strong rectus muscle. You can even have a strong TA, which is part of that deep core, and still have a dysfunctional core if it's not all working together. So again, that core system is really looking at pelvic floor as the floor, your deep TA and transverse abdominis is that deep wall of the abdomen of the core. You have your little multifidi muscles in between each vertebrae in your back, and then you also have the diaphragm as the roof of the core. This is our deep core system. This system needs to work together and be strong together to then be able to be restored and functional. If we only have a strong ab muscle but a weak pelvic floor, or if we have a tight back muscle and a tight pelvic floor, you are still going to have dysfunction, right? We need to bring balance to these muscles first. And so this is where, if you're moving through your exercises and you're aware of those body boundaries and your breath work, you can start to assess how your core is showing up, and what is really going to be effective in your core is what level you can do. So we need to make sure we're not just hopping into some movements that, yes, I am going to give you some of my favorite core exercises in this episode, but note, You could be doing these same exercises and still not strengthening your core if you don't know how to engage that deep core correctly when and how it's supposed to during these exercises. And this is the most common issue because most of these exercises people have done before, but then they come in my office and they're like, oh yeah, I do those, but now I do these because those are too easy. And then they show me and I'm like, well, actually that exercise is way too hard for your deep core. Maybe you're feeling fatigue in other muscles, so you think that's your weak link, but you haven't been paying any attention to the boundaries you're blowing through in that deep core system. So many times it can be very humbling initially. We have to really take a step back, take some weight off of our body, and just get that coordination down with our breathing because we really need to have that bracing and breathing ability during our exercises or it's too hard. So again, make sure you're reviewing your body boundaries. I do have episodes on that, and we do go deep into those, into the Restore program that I have information on in my show notes below. But we need to make sure you're aware of those body boundaries and how to engage your core through all of these movements, or even these exercises I give you today could be pointless and even could cause problems. So my patient, she comes in and she has put so much work into her body and money into her body. She has lost so much weight. She got a tummy tuck because she had all this extra skin. And so she is determined and motivated to keep her expensive abs strong and looking nice and pretty like she wants, right? Totally valid. I'm here for the aesthetic goals as well. But we kind of had to have this discussion because she came in because she has this really bad hip pain. And we really had to start talking about the reality of pushing her strength training could be the thing making this pain worse, because looking at how she was doing her core workouts, and she was doing a lot of crunches, but even just leg lifts and some of these other less intense, should we say, core moves were still too hard for her body. So we really had to step back and have her really realize that we need to be able to brace appropriately. Then we need to be able to breathe within that brace, meaning you're not just letting that go and then tightening it back up. We're not just inhaling and releasing and exhale and tightening. You need to be able to engage that brace, hold that tone, and then be able to breathe within it, allowing a little bit of ebb and flow. And you need to be able to feel that through your exercises. So we had to just take a step back, and I have been there too. I mentioned in a couple episodes ago, I think, that I had issues with this going through my first postpartum and going into a Pilates class and doing leg lifts and crunches and V-sits and thinking it was helping when really it was just making it worse. And had I been aware of these body boundaries, I would have been like, ooh, actually, these are too hard for my body and I need to take a step back. So it can be humbling. It can even be very frustrating when we have to take a step or two or even three backwards to make sure that we are balancing our system, which means breath work. We're really relaxing and opening our tissues, just inhaling and relaxing. We are not tightening here. You're just going through different positions, deep breathing, trying to assess any tightness in your body, making sure you can feel pelvic floor expansion with your breath, back expansion with your breath, side expansion with your breath, rib cage expansion with your breath, and yes, belly expansion with your breath. But if it's not coming into the pelvic floor, we really need to get that expansion down there, or else you do have tightness there. And if we have tightness in our body and we're just going through these strengthening exercises, there is going to be some imbalance and dysfunction that starts to show up, because a tight muscle is not going to turn on how it should, right? So we first need to balance that system with the deep breath work, some gentle mobility work. I have 12 weeks worth of 5-minute mobility and breathwork exercises inside of Restore. Just so you know, if you need any more guidance there, that's where you go find that. But then we also want to get into that coordination of how we brace, how do we breathe within that system, and then integrate that into all other movements, functional movements like squats, bridges, deadlifts, lat pull down, bench press, overhead press, all of these movements where we're functionally already doing these things, starting to think, am I bracing from the bottom up? Is it a zipper jacket? Did my pelvic floor start that movement on my brace? Because if it didn't, your core is just shoving pressure down on the pelvic floor, and the whole goal is to reduce pressure on the pelvic floor. So we really want to cinch up our core like a zipper jacket from the bottom up. So what that means is that we take a big inhale, and then on the exhale, you're going to start it with a gentle kegel. Let that pull up as your belly is falling, as that air is coming out of your body. And then you're just going to tether your core like a corset right there, right at the moment before you feel like you have to tighten it, right? Or like you can't breathe, because you should still be able to breathe. You should be able to talk. You should be able to move with your core brace engaged. But if our core brace isn't engaged appropriately, or if we're not breathing appropriately, or if the load is simply too much, it is going to put a ton of excessive pressure in the system and then put you at risk for prolapse and leaking and pain. And so how do we know if it's too much or not, right? And this is where it comes down to those body boundaries. And core pressure management is going to show up like doming in the belly, that pressure change where you see the belly pop up and rise, or you see pressure on your back when you're doing some core workout, right? Maybe you're doing dead bug and you feel your spine rocking on and off the floor. That is too much. So these body boundaries, we have the ABCs and the 3 Ps. And again, I have a whole episode, go check it out. But just a quick reminder, peeing, pain, and pressure is the 3 Ps, and then the ABCs are alignment, breathing, and core coordination. So alignment is this idea that your rib cage is stacked over your pelvis and it stays that way. This is the stability part. We need to stabilize the core, which means we're locking it in and challenging it by moving your arms and legs. We're trying to challenge the core to stay in neutral. And then we want to get that strength into the rest of the body and build those secondary core layers like the rectus muscle and our glutes and even our feet. We need to make sure our feet are strong and can absorb shock so that it's not all getting shoved up into our hip. And yes, even in Restore, we work on our feet, we work on our head and neck, we work on our total body movements, our single limb movements. So lots of good stuff inside of Restore. If you're interested, definitely reach out or check the show notes below. But when it comes to some of my favorite core moves, right? And again, I had to preface with making sure you're balancing your core with breathing and mobility work, and even some soft tissue work using a pelvic wand, lacrosse balls, things like that, also all built into Restore. But then we do want to get into some strengthening stuff. So just make sure you know how to brace, how to breathe, how to be aware of those boundaries so that when you show up for these moves, they're actually effective and helpful in your body and not pushing pressure and becoming more harmful than they should be. So with that being said, some of my favorites are just first learning the brace, right? So that core zipper, it's a great core workout, wouldn't you know, because it's actually helping you turn on your brace. So this is just placing a hand on your belly, big inhale, exhale, zipper jacket, start it with a kegel, feel that hand fall towards your spine. Your ribs should also come down. We don't want to flare that rib cage. So just practice holding this brace and then practice breathing within it. This is the foundation. You need to be able to do it in every other movement. So the first exercise is just mastering that bracing and breathing. And this is tricky and it takes years, guys, because you might master it just sitting there laying down, but then you start doing it in different movements and you start to realize, whoa, doing it in side plank is really hard. Or, oh, as soon as I get up and add weight on my body, I don't feel the breath in my pelvic floor anymore. And these are boundaries. So we do need to be aware of that. So I do just love a good core bracing. But then getting into like a core march or heel taps where you're just literally marching your legs. Again, these are similar to leg lifts, just very regressed. And this is because we're not putting the emphasis on the lifting of the leg. The emphasis is the core. What is it doing? Is it rocking? Because it shouldn't. Is it twisting? It shouldn't. Is there pressure popping out? It shouldn't, right? Can we breathe within it? Can we hold that brace? Can we coordinate our breathing through that movement, trying to time that exhale through effort? So as you're lifting that leg, you are timing an exhale through that lift, inhaling as you lower, and then you're alternating sides. So the core march is a really great one. And then this does progress into like dead bug, but a lot of people go straight to things like dead bug, not realizing that they can't even appropriately get both legs up off of the floor. And then again, if you can't even appropriately get both legs off the floor, you better not be doing dead bug, and you better not be doing double leg lifts, because that's definitely going to put too much pressure onto your core and pelvic floor organs, and that's not what we want. So we don't want to think about all of these progressions as different variations of movement. They are different variations, but you want to make sure that you are in the right level of that exercise, right? Because I could have said dead bug is another one, leg lifts is another one, but they're all kind of variations of each other. And if you can't do the very basic one, which is a march, then you're not ready for it. So I like to start with the march. So the core march, great one. Another really good one is a bent knee fallout. This bent knee fallout is just lying down with your knees bent, similar to the core march position. And then you're just going to let one of your legs slowly fall out to the side, but you're holding that brace and keeping your pelvis and your spine from rocking. So this is starting to attack some of the obliques and those rotational muscles in your core as we let that leg slowly fall out to the side. So this is another good one that I like, bent knee fallout. And then another one that I think can be really helpful is starting to target the core in different planes of motion, like a side plank. So side planks are really, really great. We start to get different engagement through your back, through your lats, through your obliques, through your glutes. So side plank can be a really great one. And then we can progress that or regress that in a lot of different ways as well. And then another one is being on your hands and knees. And yes, we could call this bird dog right away, but that might be too hard. So you might even just start with bracing on your hands and knees. Maybe you then add an arm lift as you are exhaling and trying to keep that spine from extending or rocking, or timing exhale through that movement. You want to feel some pelvic floor expansion, but start seeing on hands and knees how your core is handling it. And then you might be able to get into bird dog, which is like dead bug, but on your hands and knees. So you're alternating opposite arm and leg extension. But when you're on your hands and knees, you do need to be careful, because this is where your back is going to want to rock more. And a lot of people, once they add that leg lift, they do lift too high and the back does rock and it extends way too high. And that puts a lot more movement in the back than we want and can cause some back pain. And we don't want to put extra pressure through the belly, and gravity does pull on the belly. So this position is a little bit more difficult to grasp. Make sure you're really feeling the bracing and that pressure isn't pouching out. And you might even use a yoga block or a book or something on your back to make sure that it doesn't rock or fall off, because if it does, then you do know that your leg went way too high or your arm lift went way too high and you couldn't stabilize your spine, because the spine shouldn't move at all. Okay, that is the ultimate goal with core strengthening. At least that first initial few phases is really just locking it in and stabilizing it. And then there is a place where we get into different types of twisting exercises and crunching exercises, but those are just to get those external layers and make sure everything's strong. We can't start there. Most people start with those moves, but those moves are so risky. They're crunching pressure into the pelvic bowl, twisting and wringing pressure into the pelvic bowl, especially if you don't know how to offset that with your breathing and your bracing. So this isn't to say we never get to crunches or never get to Russian twists or leg lifts or V-sits, but those are way down the line. We first have to start with these stability moves and then challenge them with other big muscle groups and other big core moves, and even the secondary core, by strengthening the glutes, strengthening the feet, strengthening the upper body, making sure that whole kinetic chain is working together and sharing the load, because that's when the core and all the other muscles can actually show up the best they can. If the core is doing all the work, it's going to cause some pain and some roadblocks along the way. If it's not doing all the work and other things are sharing the load that the core should be, body, same thing. We're going to find pain and dysfunction and weakness and leaking and prolapse and back pain and all these things. So we need to make sure it's all working together. And then we do really want to make it functional. So obviously all these exercises are more or less on the mat, right? We're starting on our back, we're doing some bracing, some marching, we're rolling onto our side, doing some side plank, maybe even modified on our knees. Then we're rolling to our hands and knees and doing some bracing and some arm and leg lifts there. But we don't function on the ground really. So it is also great to practice this standing, practice bracing standing, practice a functional carry like a luggage carry or a farmer carry, although I prefer luggage carry, which means you're only holding weight on one side because then the opposite side of your abs do have to engage more. So a nice little tip, if you do want a little bit more core work, make it unilateral, whether it's a row or a bridge, make it single leg bridge, make it a unilateral row. You are going to get more core out of that because it has to stabilize and hold you in neutral. So those are some of my favorite exercises to start with, but just know it really is about those body boundaries and how your body shows up. And also know we have tools like the pelvic wand and the ball and some of these other nice release tools to help manage the tension that might come into those muscles as you work on strengthening, because that is a big piece people miss. You aren't going to get the strength you want if you don't also release those tight muscles. If they stay tight and then you go strengthen again and they stay tight and you go strengthen again, you are going to hit a roadblock. You're not going to be able to progress as fast, and you might even start to cause some pain. So just do yourself a favor and make sure you're following up your strength training with some deep breathing and maybe some soft tissue release and fascial work with a foam roller or a lacrosse ball or even a pelvic wand. But it's really about that deeper mind-body connection and feeling in your body versus just checking out and going through the movements. So if you want to feel stronger and be more stable, make sure that you are thinking of this deep brace, thinking of the breathing, thinking about that movement of the pelvic floor with your breath. This is going to improve your leaking, the pressure in your body, the posture, the pain. And if you're not seeing any relief and you want to get some, make sure you reach out and join Restore, which is my 12-week on-demand program where I do walk through all of this. We go through breath work and mobility, how to brace, how to breathe within it, how to bring that into all these other core moves, how to make that core space function through everything else, bringing it into the total body space, functional movements, single leg, upper body, lower body, getting you back to running, getting you back to those V-sits and crunches, but that's not till week 12, okay? So you really do need to start slow, scale back if you need to, really master the basics. And this is confusing stuff, guys. So if you are local or if you are wanting to get on a one-on-one coaching session, this is where I can actually look at your body, look at your bracing, look at your posture, look at your breathing and give you feedback and be able to tell you how to adjust, how to modify your exercises, what parts of the Restore program or what different exercises you might want to prioritize based on your individual needs. So there's definitely a lot of benefit in doing one-on-one coaching calls. But if you feel like you've got those foundational pieces down and you just want a game plan and a 12-week program to just show up and hit start on, that's what Restore is for. And right now it is on a holiday end of year sale for $497. This is the beta stage, so I am selling it at this $497 price before I really up level it in 2026, and it will be selling for $997 when I have it fully built out, because right now there are 12 weeks worth of lessons, 12 weeks worth of 5-minute workouts and 20-minute workouts, a bonus module on vaginal assessment and pelvic floor wand work, a bonus module on nutrition and manual therapy strategies. That's all in there already. But what's coming is a much more a more detailed reset toolbox for how to know how to reset parts of your body, and also a little bit more guidance and instruction on when and where to use the manual therapy tools. In what order should you do these things? Because it's a lot of things. We've got some breath work and mobility in there, some strengthening and stability as well. And then there's this library with all these soft tissue tools. So I thought it would be cool to give some little master classes and webinars within the Restore program to really lay it out for you so you really understand what and when and how to use all of the tools and resources inside of Restore. And I'm going to be putting out a new format for the 20-minute workouts as well, which means there will be 2 20-minute workouts in each week. So we are buffing this bad boy up, and it is still on sale for $4.97. So make sure you reach out and join now, and make sure to stay tuned for the Pelvic Floor Core and More show, where we will have new things coming at you next week. But then the 2 weeks during Christmas and New Year's, I will be doing a best of series replay where we will be listening to the best episodes that we had on the show in 2025. So I hope that this was helpful for you, friend. Make sure to share with anybody that you think could benefit and really understand more about what truly strengthens their core, because unfortunately, crunches, just like kegels, can make things worse. And ain't nobody got time for that, right? So I'm here whenever you're ready, friend. I hope you have a great weekend, and wash those hands, drink lots of water, and stay away from the stomach bug. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've got so many other important things going on, but I hope it was helpful and you leave here with some tools to help you in your healing journey. And I just want to ask you, if you have found this helpful, to please leave a review on iTunes. Scroll down to the bottom of my podcast page and leave that 5-star review so it can help other women see this information. And also, if you want to be a part of my community of amazing women trying to balance all the things, great tips and insight and sharing stories and just motivating each other along the way, feel free to join my Facebook group, The Balanced Momtality Wellness and Support. I hope to see you here next time on the Balanced Momtality Podcast.